Hi everyone, I want to introduce a very special guest, Maureen Hurley from Sonoma County, California. She's a poet and an artist, a visual artist in her own right. And I'd like to welcome Maureen. Hi Maureen.
Thank you so much, Lily Firehouse Projects. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a surprise. I am here visiting, helping taking care of a neighbor's mother, and I have been collaborating with him for ages, and so this seemed like a perfect opportunity for me to come and talk about my work. I arrived late writing poetry. I am a dyslexic, so I had no idea that poetry was inside of me. And imagine my surprise when one day there was a very famous poet who came to our college, and his name was Gary Snyder. And he wrote a poem about where I grew up. And I went, that ridge is wrong, that information. I can do this. No idea what I was getting into. So that was the beginning of my sentence of writing poetry. But previous to that, I was working as a photographer for local newspapers, alternative newspapers, and I was also going to school for my visual arts degrees.
Where did you go?
I went to school at College of Marin, and then San Francisco State, then Sonoma State, then San Francisco State again. Meanwhile, segueing over to UC Berkeley because I was studying medieval history and Celtic studies.
Oh my goodness.
So that encapsulates about 40 years there, minor detail. So.
Well, awesome. And actually, since you said you came late to poetry,
yeah. What
inspired you to do that about turn and start writing? Just this incident?
Well, this incident was the kick in the butt. That certainly inspired me. What happened was I was probably already nudging at the edges of it, and I began to write, and I thought that they were ballads because I was very interested in folk music, and being Irish, we did a lot. I knew a lot of Irish folk ballads, and so I was sort of segueing off that, and I actually called up a teacher at Sonoma State. I'd already gotten my degrees and everything, and here I was, this orphan, and I was like, is that all there is? There's got to be more to poetry till you're getting your education than that. And I called up this teacher out of the blue, and I said, I have this problem. I'm writing all this stuff. I have no idea if it's any good. And he said, sign up for the class. And his name is David Bromwich, and he's a very, very well-known, eminent poet. And so thus began my more formal career and training as a poet. But I came in cold turkey, meaning I had no English degree, no literature background. It was, trial by fire.
I'd like to start listening to some of your writings.
Yeah.
If you want to read some.
I would love to, thank you. I'm going to read the first piece I really would love to read is Billy Collins lives in Florida, and I've been listening to his broadcasts, and I took one of his workshops, and he wrote this poem that got me started on this idea of, he was working with language from the Hebrides from Scotland, and he said bags of time, and I was so fascinated by that. I found myself trying to write something in response to him. And so this is very, very fresh, hot off the press, and it's after hearing Billy Collins read Bags of Time. I am enamored by the Schaunfocal from South Uist, Bags of Time. When did we put time in a bag? I envisioned bags of wool, 3 bags full to be exact. 1 black, 2 white, double tax on the black bag, and none for the little boy who lived down the lane. Once upon a time, the great wool tax was levied by Longshanks, and the peasants revolted. I had to sing the nursery rhyme as my Irish baby name is invoked. It's the Baba Black Sheep, have you any wool? Black sheep run in the family. And no, it's not a racist nursery rhyme. That's a bad case of presentism at work. My Corkonian grandmother cursed Longshanks and Cromwell daily. So I thought the Antichrist would come and get me like the big bad wolf. I was horrified to also discover that Longshanks and Cromwell had been dead for some time. In America, we say oodles of time. What are oodles exactly? Rhymes with noodles. A Tennessee slant rhyme, perhaps, to accompany caboodle, as in kitten caboodle. Perhaps a lost cargo from the Dutch, as in bodle or property. Open-ended portmanteaus of time, but these medieval bags, morphed from a hunting term to a race or an appointment, as in fixed time. Boris Johnson said there were bags of time for the Brexit exit, but it was Halloween, and you know what kind of mischief people get up to when the gates of the other world swing open wide on rusted hinges. When did we swap bagging game for bagging time? It all comes down to timing and knowing when your race is run. It's in the bag.
How delightful, what a delightful.
So I should have prefaced that with saying that I did a lot of folklore collecting.
Yeah.
So this is a lot of folklore reference in there. And when I was going to UC Berkeley, I worked with the great Alan Dundas, who is an eminent folklore collector, and we had to collect 40 pieces of folklore. And so this is it, even though that was in 92 or something, I'm still collecting folklore. I can't help it now. So,
but it's just so transformed and so delightfully put together.
Oh, thank you very much.
And talk about your fine arts background. It's like a collage of these things.
Yes, it is very much a collage.
It's very much visual as well.
Yeah.
And
I don't know how it is for you, because you said you're a visual artist as well. Do you see something and automatically take one idea and two ideas and suddenly put them together?
That and pictures come into my head.
And
even music. I hear music, I see pictures in it.
That's making metaphor. And all I'm doing is just doing that thing that's happening all the time in the background. Yeah. And sometimes people aren't aware of it, and I'm making metaphor all the time. You could be making simile instead of metaphor, but I'm thinking more, especially somebody who's a fine artist, you go direct to the juice, you make metaphor versus simile. So
is there another one?
Oh, sure. So let's see what we have here. Afternoon at Woolworths. First rain of the season.
Young people hear Woolworth. What is that?
I was going to say, well, it's not CVS. But this is certainly a period piece, and a very well-known beat poet named Al Winans had posted a Woolworth's drugstore photo, and it was in San Francisco, and I looked at it, and I'm sure you have this with visual arts too. I found one memory, and I pulled it out to examine it, and it was attached to another, and another, and another, and suddenly there was this whole long piece about the Woolworth's lunch counter, and I had to be 4 years old or less. So it definitely is a memory poem. So it's called Afternoon Tea at Woolworth's. My grandmother stopped in at the Woolworth's lunch counter for a brisk pot of tea after a day of shopping. We watched green and cream trolleys rumble down Powell to the Market Street turnstile, spin like a music box dancers when the electric trams labored like lugubrious caterpillars. The air singed blue with cascades of electric sparks whipping the air as their antennae crossed the junction box. Iron wheels groaned, singing lost songs to the embedded tracks where the horses once labored. I remember the little scoops of vanilla ice cream, a summit to be conquered with fork and finger, while she worked a raft of apple pie adrift on a thick plate, and the clink of spoons as she stirred her tea was a braille of fairy bells. They did it right, she said, beating a staccato on the sides of the mug. Waiters always scalded the teapot before filling it with boiling water, with the Lipton tea bag already inside. They knew to follow her instructions to the letter. God help them if they brought the tea bag still in its ceremonial wrapper on a separate plate. She would have none of that. No lukewarm water in the pot. No tea bag as an afterthought. Utter nonsense, she said. Afternoon tea, properly made, righted the world. I practiced my alphabet, my fingers tracing slow sounds along the shores of the puddle flooding the Formica counter.
I love it because you said that Woolworth. I had an image, not only an image of it, but a smell of it.
Yes, it had an odor.
It had not a bad odor. Actually, I remember it having like a chocolate. I think that's because I had my parents buy me this chocolate filled with marshmallows.
Oh, so sort of like the pre-Twinkie days.
At least that's what I envision.
Yeah.
And eating it. So I have now a vision of Woolworth images, smell and taste.
That's right, they would be in Woolworths in New York, yes.
Oh, no, and I'm talking Havana.
Havana? Whoa!
I'm talking way back in Havana. I'm assuming, yes, we had a Woolworth. I mean, I was in the States and I was in St. Louis, Missouri in the late 50s. I'm sure there was one there, but I think my image and smell and taste come from back then.
That's an extraordinary image. Now I want to hear all about the Havana Wars. That's fascinating.
Now, I don't know if you want to jump to the fact that we talked about this creative pandemic beginnings of a lot of things.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was for me, and it was for a lot of friends of mine as well, artist friends and stuff. And how was it for you?
Well, it's interesting because the first poem I read, the Billy Collins poem, I would never have connected with him had it not been the pandemic. I was desperate. And I realized that, I think we'd been 20 months in, sequestered, and I wasn't getting, there were some Zoom things. I wind up teaching via Zoom, so it wasn't completely cut off from the world, pretty close. And so I took a workshop with Billy Collins, and then he inadvertently, I didn't even know about this, twice a week, he has a poetry broadcast. And about 200 of us join every, twice a week, and he talks about poetry. He reads some of his own poems, he reads other people's poems, and talks about various things, plays jazz at the beginning, plays jazz at the end. So suddenly I went from being completely isolated to having a Facebook, Zoom community.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I couldn't have envisioned doing this had we not gone through the sequestration.
I think there are a lot of things that emerge as a result, and not necessarily bad things.
No.
To me, my creativity flourished.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I had art studio. So I had pages.
Exactly. All of a sudden I said, oh, wait a minute, let me push this and let me push that. And then images started flowing out of my head. So to me, it's very exciting.
Well, the idea is that silence and be recollected in tranquility is probably the biggest gift you can have as an artist.
Yeah.
To have time, you have to foment. I mean, they always say, give a writer a deadline and you'll have the cleanest house in the world. But there is something to that. So it's like I found myself ordering supplies on Amazon, and I started. This sounds really daft, but there's something called Michaels, and they have these little videos, and I thought, what have I got to lose, So I started playing them, and I have to buy some, Gamelin oils. Okay, so I'll get that. Oh, I have to get, and it sort of forced me to do things that I would not normally have done. But in that process, it opened up another area. So I was able to start having more than just the writer's voice, and I do a lot of journaling, especially on my blog. But suddenly my creativity was blossoming in the visual world, and it was so long, I was starved. Yeah. So that's what the pandemic ultimately gave me, was that.
That's awesome. I know we talked about the fact that you were influenced by a piece of Kurt Whipple's, right?
That was an interesting story. We knew of each other, and we had friends in common. And when you started mentioning the photographer in Northern California, I'm like, who is it? Because I'm thinking the degrees of separation are very, very small. And what happened was we kept running into each other at these events that were bringing Soviet artists to Northern California, and this is before the fall of the Soviet Union. And we got to talking, and then one day he called me up and he said he was working on something called Nocturnes, and it's music for two pianos, so four-handed, both Kirk and Marilyn, they play together as a duo. And he said he wanted me in on the ground floor to start recording the event and to write poems, and I was flabbergasted, stunned, shocked, whatever, thesaurus word we'd like to use, and I was also very honored. And long story short, I applied for a fellowship through the Sonoma County Community Foundation, which was funded by Charles and Jeannie Schultz, and Peanuts fame. Think of Charlie Brown. So Charlie Brown was our mascot. So I would go over to Kirk's house almost every day, and I would listen to his day journal, or he was writing his dreams, and then I would do a riff off of that. Then he would work on a piece and start composing it, and then I would come and listen to it, then do a riff off of that, and then we would put the two things together. So it was a tripartite event, and I would lay under the piano as he composed. It was really wonderful.
What's the sound like?
The best spot in the house, like audience, the best spot of the house is literally under the piano. You get a full body massage.
Oh.
And you'd think it'd be too loud. It isn't. It's really weird. I mean, you feel the body, you feel the music everywhere in your body. And it's a sort of gentle patting. It's like laying of hands or something.
I guess all your cells are vibrating to the...
It's sound waves are
hitting your cells.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary experience. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing when you do it in a formal concert hall and you're all under the piano.
No, but every time, the next time I have the front seat of a rehearsal, you better believe I'm going to crawl under the piano.
Make sure the piano's tuned, that's all I can say. If it's not tuned, you'd be really, really in trouble. It is called For the Two of Us. Soft tracings of shadow on the sill. Late afternoon in the unconservatory. A chocolate stillness inside, the voice rises up in place of speech. Small nuances, a brass color note, flared nostrils, the contact of skin. Four-handed improv, foreplay on the keyboards. Two pianos discuss familiar phrases like the long married and finish each other's thoughts. Sometimes in chorus, sometimes in tandem. You're the yell in the forest and I'm the echo. Echo, echo, echo. Kirk says to Mari as they play it again. Imagine Casablanca and Havana in a red dress. A strange marriage of classical and jazz, shapes shifting into music for the end of the millennium. He is a sailor leaning into the open octaves of a turquoise melody. Bluebirds learn slant rhyme. She is the swimmer in pastoral snowfields. Everything is reduced to black and white. It cleanses the palate and the roses bleed onto the piano keys. A melody escapes, anneals the heart with opposites, day and night. Diamond and onyx, ebony and ivory. Each seeks the other's eyes through the corbelled pianos. I can't tell where one leaves off and the other begins. Poco a poco, an echo in the forest lifts the timbre of the pool's depths. At the bottom of the well, cross currents, a vibration in the water like electricity when the wall comes up as a duet. Both are one, and one is all there is.
The thing that you did with Kirk, the Christmas solstice last summer, if we want to talk a little bit about that and how you were involved and what you read.
It was called Uncharted Journey, and so I wound up doing these free writes. This is actually literally in between takes.
Oh, neat!
So the first one, it's called Light. I wonder why. That's actually the name of the piece. Perhaps The idea of light began with Morse code, an SOS from deep space. My mind wanders to the opening bars of Chief Inspector Morse. Who doesn't love puzzling out a good mystery? Yet, the truth of the flute had other destinations in mind. I am reminded that I am not in charge. The mind maps of music, each is unique, a signature, a frenzied rhythm, the hummingbird of war. The coda is always another message, a cipher, and then the piano brings it all home with an arpeggio. A cascade of music ends with the one-note song of a car horn on distant streets, reminding me of old Havana, a place where I've never been, a place where I can never return to, and I mourn for what was lost and for what is coming.
Very, very nice.
And then,
I'd like to hear the dance.
the dance one? Okay.
Yeah.
The Blue Path. This is piece number 5. And I didn't invent the titles. The titles were given to me through the music. I mean, that's what they were called.
Yeah.
Snazzy snap and step of the dancer, the jazzy path and tickle of a piano. Blue notes, late nightclubs of the soul, loitering after hours. The sleaze of cigarette smoke, a chorus of martini glasses, or is it mojitos at dawn? Breakfast of champions! Well, for Hemingway it was, of course. Poor man offed himself for no real reason. It was either writer's block or he was too drunk to stand up at the typewriter. The sun also rises. The sun is a rose, old man, and the sea is opalescent. The meniscus beckons, old man. The sea, a boat, the staccato of a drum solo. Surely Africa is invoked. I want to tell Ernest to wait it out. The best is yet to come. The sullen, relentless art. We've all been there. We dance across the darkness of the dance floor, snapping our fingers. We are dancing, dancing like moths toward that burning flame. You know, I can't snap.
Really?
I can't snap. I just realized that. Can you snap for me, please? Thank you. I just need to cast
Yes,
it.
no. And isn't that how the beatniks used to clap?
Yeah, exactly. In the midst of all this, not only did I learn how to write, this is like, hit the streets running kind of story, I learned to teach and to go into the classroom and teach kids poetry when I was learning. Mm. So I work with an organization called California Poets in the Schools, and I think it's 55th year. It's the oldest artist in residence program in the nation.
Oh, nice.
And I trained with poets to learn how to do this, and then we wrote our own grants, and I worked that's how I got to the Soviet Union, was through Poets in the Schools. I wrote a grant to the California Arts Council. They said, sure, that sounds good. And then the next thing I knew, I was on a plane to the Soviet Union. How did I get here? And then it was kids. It was, a kid, and what happened was, it was April. And it was raining, and I think it was after Chernobyl, and everybody was afraid of the radioactive. And scientists said, "Oh, the cloud is not going to come over California." Well, guess what? It did. Oh, it won't rain. Guess what? It did. And I remember looking up at the eaves of the school. The rain was really coming down, and I realized even though there was protection and the rain wasn't falling on me, the radiation was.
Of course.
And it was such an extraordinary experience, not a good one. And the kids were pretty freaked out. And one of them said, "Oh, we ought to nuke those commies." It hit a raw nerve when that kid said that. And I said, And I thought, I can just ignore it and just kind of go, And I said, nah, I'm taking this one on. Being Irish, I got to take it on, And I said, do you think that Soviet kids want to nuke us? And there was this, you could hear a pin drop, dead silence. And the kids go, no. And then the discussion began, and I said, and I talked a lot about, stereotypes and how we get into these, sort of ideas of us versus them, the enemy. What was it? Pogo, we discovered the enemy and the enemy is us. Yeah. And I said, what do you want to do about this? You know, is there anything you'd like to do to ameliorate the situation or change it? And they said, yeah, we'd like to send them some art and some poetry. And so it happened. I was Miss Toad's Wild Ride all the way, and I was in the Soviet Union by August. Anyway, so working with kids has been very much part of my creative process. You were asking about that. And so during the, during the pandemic, I actually wound up teaching in about 3 different schools via Zoom and other platforms, which were pretty bad. And it was kind of interesting because suddenly, I don't know if you noticed that I'm waving my arms a lot, trying to take off. I can't help it. I have to, when I teach, I'm up and waltzing and moving, and all of a sudden I'm a talking head. So one of the horrors was I had to be in the camera, like, I had to stay in this little circle, and they couldn't see my hands. And I realized I had to completely reinvent myself to teach. So I had to work in a different way. And the kids, I reached the kids in a different way because they were so freaked out, and I became a stabilizing force in their lives. It allowed them the freedom to talk about their feelings, which is not something that happens readily in a school.
Yeah.
And so then we could take the feelings and how do you transform it into art by making metaphor. So that became a huge component of keeping my sanity as well as theirs. I try to write in the classroom, the Zoom classroom. I try to write whenever they write so that they don't feel that I'm a teacher and it's an assignment. And we try to make it a very collaborative process. This is called the gift of this day. I am offering this day filled with fog and sunlight, my hands holding the air up to the sky. The pine trees whisper such secrets that the cats climb up the trunk in search of lost youth. The birds scold her for her transgressions, and she retreats, having nowhere else to go but down. Only the sky overhead, but it is overcast today. I love you, said the sky to the clouds. I love you, said the wind to the trees. And they whispered back secrets to each other, which I could not translate. The sun breaks through, warming the bones of the old cat, and she is grateful for this gift, this day.
Thank you, Maureen Hurley, for introducing us to your poem.
Thank you so much.
And finally meeting you, I have all these friends of Kirk Whipple and Marilyn Morales from Northern California on Facebook, on Zoom, and it's been fun meeting you and spending time.
Oh, thank you. If
I'd
had a little more time to prepare, I would have had something bilingual because I know your audience is bilingual.
Yes, and you speak some Spanish.
I am learning Cuban Spanish.
Oh, well.
Let me just say it's different than Mexican Spanish.
Oh, well, yes.
I've learned not to say Monday. I've learned all kinds of fabulous swear words.
Oh, I was going to say, did you get any Cubans?
Well, I'm Romeo. And worse.
Don't
what I've noticed with Cuban Spanish is it is very, very different than Mexican Spanish, and that's what I know is Mexican Spanish.
Well, Spanish in every country is different,
and
it's totally different from Spain.
And my friend, Kirk's mother-in-law, Justa, is from Pinar del Rio. Well, one of the things that flattens language, ironically, I collect folklore, so that becomes sort of critical. How do you wrap folklore before it completely changes and is destroyed? I did collect some of Justa's folklore, just so you know. Oh, and I read it back to her. It was fascinating.
Really?
Biography. For me, it's really important to grab those bits of information because they're fast going. And, I love the Marshall McLuhan idea of the global village, but I also don't like the flattening of cultures. I have a very good friend, Jorge Lujan, who lives in Mexico, but he's Argentinian. He's a Basque derivation. He's a songwriter, musician. He's a musician and a poet, and he does all these wonderful collaboratives, and he also works with children in the school. So one of my fun bits was I got to go to Mexico City into the Museo de Antropología and teach in front of the big stone calendar,
Oh,
the Aztec calendar, which was pretty fun.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. Well, it's been fun.
Yes, why thank you. A lot of travel under the belt.
Yes.